The morning air was thick with tension as Donald Trump's motorcade snaked its way through the narrow streets of an ancient city, halfway across the world. It was supposed to be a straightforward diplomatic mission, a series of closed-door meetings with powerful overseas officials, meant to finalize a sprawling economic deal that could redefine trade between the two nations. Trump sat in the back of his armored vehicle, leafing through a thick folder of briefing notes. But his mind wasn't fully on the words. He was used to pressure, to high stakes, to the sharp, cold calculus of political theater. Yet even he could sense that this trip was different. The region had been economically battered for decades, and while the leadership was eager for investment and partnership, the population was wary, angry, and desperate for change. Negotiations would be tricky, with every handshake concealing 1,000 unspoken tensions. Trump adjusted his tie and glanced out the window. The city passed by like a dreamscape, towering glass buildings beside crumbling stone structures, opulent hotels next to slums stitched together from scraps of rusted metal and tarps. Here, wealth and poverty didn't just coexist, they collided. His advisors, seated across from him in the vehicle, continued murmuring last-minute reminders about the cultural nuances he needed to respect, the political sensitivities he had to navigate. Trump nodded absently. He knew the script: say the right things, make the right deals, secure the headlines back home. It was business as usual, or at least it should have been. By the time the motorcade pulled up to the grand government building, reporters and security personnel swarmed like bees. The red carpet was already unfurled, cameras poised to capture every step he made. As he exited the vehicle, he was greeted by a row of stern-faced officials in formal dress, each one bowing stiffly as they shook his hand. The ceremonial fanfare dragged on longer than necessary, handshakes, more staged smiles for the cameras. Trump maintained his trademark composure, but inwardly he was restless. There were deals to be made, papers to be signed, and speeches to be given. He wasn't one for ceremony, he was there to get things done. The first round of negotiations took place in an ornate chandeliered hall. Maps of infrastructure projects and trade routes were unfurled on mahogany tables. Interpreters buzzed in the background, translating every word as Trump. And the foreign dignitaries sparred politely over terms and timelines. Occasionally, Trump leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, studying the officials across from him with the same keen instinct he had used for decades in boardrooms. They wanted the partnership badly, but they were scared too. Scared of losing sovereignty, scared of angering their own citizens. Trump knew he could leverage that fear, but part of him also knew it wasn't just about leverage anymore. If this deal went wrong, it wouldn't just be financial headlines, it could mean unrest, even violence. After hours of intense discussions, a temporary break was called. Trump's team suggested he rest in the private suite, prepared for him on the top floor of the building. But restless energy gnawed at him. Instead of retreating upstairs, he decided to take a short, unscheduled drive through the city, to see firsthand what he was really dealing with. His Secret Service detail, already stretched thin by the complexities of protecting a former president in a foreign land, scrambled to adjust. Within minutes, a reduced convoy rolled back into the heart of the city, veering away from the manicured government district and into neighborhoods where foreign leaders rarely dared to go. It was in these streets that Trump saw the real story. Shops with crumbling roofs, families huddled under bridges, children chasing each other barefoot through alleys, laughter somehow piercing the heavy air. There was a vitality here, raw and unfiltered, but it was underscored by grinding poverty. Trump watched silently, his mind shifting gears from geopolitical strategy to something more primal, something human. The motorcade slowed to a crawl as they passed a congested market. His security detail grew tense. This wasn't part of the plan. Trump leaned forward, tapping the window. A small crowd had gathered along the road, curious about the convoy. Among them, a girl stood out not because of her clothes, which were tattered, or because of her bare feet, but because of the fierce determination etched into her young face. She wasn't begging like some of the others. She was selling. In her hands, she held a tray of small woven crafts bracelets. Tiny figures made from dyed reeds, the colors faded but intricate. She held them high, calling out words in the local language. Even without understanding her speech, Trump could hear the strength in her voice. No fear, no desperation. Just a steely resolve that cut through the noise. On impulse, he instructed the driver to pull over. The security detail immediately protested. "Mr. Trump, we can't guarantee safety here," one of them said urgently. Trump waved them off. "It's fine. Just keep your eyes open," he said, his voice calm but firm. He stepped out of the car, and a ripple of shock ran through the small crowd. Cameras clicked, cell phones were raised, but Trump barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the girl. She looked up at him without flinching. Her dark eyes sharp and intelligent. She said something, holding up a bracelet. Trump smiled and knelt down slightly to her level. His translator rushed forward, hurriedly explaining. "She says she made it herself. She says it brings strength." Trump chuckled. "Strength, huh? I could use a little of that," he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a wad of local currency, far more than the bracelet was worth, and bought it from her. But it wasn't the money or the transaction that mattered. It was the exchange of spirit, the spark of something real, something unfiltered, something profoundly human. What Trump didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this brief encounter was about to change. Not just the course of the girl's life, but perhaps the future of the country itself. The moment Donald Trump stepped out of his vehicle and into the chaos of the street, the air around him changed. The noise of vendors shouting, children laughing, and engines groaning dimmed to a hush as people realized who had just entered their world. Cameras snapped up like lightning strikes, and local bystanders stared, frozen with disbelief. Trump, flanked by his jittery security team and a scrambling translator, ignored the cameras, ignored the muttering officials in his earpiece, and walked calmly toward the girl with the tray. Her name, as he would soon learn, was Sophia Khalid, a 12-year-old with sharp eyes, sand-worn sandals, and the poise of someone 3 times her age. She didn't run. She didn't beg. She stood firm. And when Trump asked her name through the translator, she responded not with fear, but with purpose. "Sophia," she said, holding up one of her handmade bracelets. "My family needs to eat today." Trump's brow lifted. It wasn't the words, it was the delivery. He could see that beneath her dirt-smudged cheeks and rag-wrapped braids was a mind that knew more than it should. The bracelet in her hand was simple, woven from dyed threads and dried reeds, but it was tight, balanced, symmetrical. The kind of craftsmanship that took both patience and precision. It reminded him, oddly, of the first time he noticed structure in a building as a young boy with his father in Queens. "You made this?" he asked. The translator nodded as Sophia confirmed. Trump took it gently, examining the twists in the braid. "How long does one take?" he asked. 10 minutes, she said, then added, "if the wind isn't strong." He smirked. Smart answer. She didn't smile back. She wasn't trying to charm him. She was surviving. Trump pulled more local currency from his jacket and handed it to her. Far more than the price of a bracelet. The crowd gasped. Sophia's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't lunge for it. She simply reached out and accepted it with quiet dignity. He turned to the translator. "Ask her something," he said. "Ask what she really wants to do. What she would do if this she motioned around them wasn't her life." The translator repeated the question. Sophia blinked slowly, clearly unaccustomed to being asked about dreams. When she answered, her voice dropped just a bit. "I want to build things," she said. "Machines that help people. My mother is sick." I wanted to build her something that could help her breathe. Trump stood still for a moment, absorbing the words. It didn't feel rehearsed. It didn't feel like one of the staged meet and greets he had endured on countless campaign trails. This was real, pure. He looked at her and felt something shift, like a weight had tilted just enough inside his chest to throw off his balance. He didn't believe in signs, not really, but in this moment, something inside told him he hadn't stopped here by accident. Behind him, one of his aides whispered sharply through a calm, "Mr. Trump, the delegation is asking why you're late." He ignored it. He bent down and asked Sophia, through the translator, where her family lived. She pointed down a side alley and, without hesitating, Trump motioned for his team to follow her. Panic bloomed on the faces of his security detail. "Sir, this is not safe," one agent warned. "We haven't cleared," but he waved them off again. "We're clearing it now." He followed the girl through the narrow alley, the crowd buzzing behind them. Sophia led them to a crumbling brick structure with a curtain instead of a door, and inside, the scent of dampness and smoke was thick in the air. Sophia's mother lay on a woven mat, pale and wheezing, a wet cloth pressed to her head. Two younger children sat nearby, blinking at the sudden arrival of men in suits and earpieces. Trump stepped inside, ducking beneath a sagging beam, and took it all in. This was poverty, raw, unfiltered, untelevised. His entourage stayed outside urgently, but Trump knelt beside the woman, speaking gently through his translator. She couldn't answer, her breathing was shallow, but she nodded as he asked questions. Sophia crouched beside him, answering for her, explaining how they had been evicted 2 years ago, how Sophia had dropped out of school to sell goods in the market, how her father had died in a factory collapse when she was 7. It was too much. Trump stood slowly and looked around the room. There were holes in the walls, a single cracked mirror, no electricity, and a single container of water in the corner. He turned to Sophia and said, "Do you want to go to school?" She nodded immediately. "Do you want your siblings to go too?" Another nod. He looked at the translator. "Tell her I'm going to make sure she does." Outside, his staff was in a frenzy. They had no press release for this, no pre-approved optics. But Trump wasn't interested in press. He scribbled something onto the back of a business card and handed it to one of his aides. "Call my team back in New York. I want full sponsorship, education, housing, medical, all of it. Quietly, no press." The aide blinked. "Sir, you heard me." As Trump walked back to his car, the crowd parted for him. People whispered, some clapped. Sophia stood at the edge of the alley, holding the bracelet he'd bought. She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. Her eyes did all the talking. And as the car door closed behind him, Trump sat back, staring at the bracelet in his hand. It was small, but it meant something. That evening, back in the presidential suite of the Foreign Ministry's guest wing, Donald Trump sat alone, still holding the bracelet. The room around him was lavish polished marble floors, velvet curtains, and a staff of attendants hovering just out of sight, but his focus was somewhere else. The bracelet sat on the polished wood table in front of him, its strands faded, the pattern slightly asymmetrical. Yet to him, it was more valuable than the briefcase of policy documents piled on his bed. He hadn't planned to deviate from the mission. He certainly hadn't planned to get involved with a child selling trinkets in the street. But Sophia's face kept coming back to him, not just her eyes, but her voice, her clarity, her insistence that building machines could help her mother breathe. That wasn't the voice of a girl lost in poverty. That was the voice of someone with potential. And potential was something Trump had always recognized. He asked one of his aides to contact the translator from earlier. Within an hour, the man returned, along with a local interpreter, who had spoken with Sophia's uncle, her closest living relative with legal guardianship. Trump sat with them at the long mahogany table under the suite's chandelier and began asking questions. "Where's the father?" he asked. "Dead," the translator replied softly. "Industrial accident, no compensation, and the mother, sick. Likely chronic pneumonia, no access to reliable medication or clean air. She sleeps sitting up to breathe." Trump's jaw tightened. "Siblings? 2, ages 5 and 7, unregistered, never been to school. They sell water bottles at intersections." He shook his head slowly, trying to wrap his mind around it. He had seen poverty before, both domestically and abroad, but this wasn't just poverty. This was neglect by a system. "What about her?" he asked. "Sophia." "What's her situation?" The translator leaned forward. She dropped out of school 2 years ago. She was top of her class before that. Teachers say she built a hand-crank fan from scraps to cool the classroom. Once created a water filter from charcoal and plastic bottles. Never trained. Just learned. Trump raised an eyebrow. From where? She said she dreams about it. He sat back, fingers steepled in front of his mouth. For a long moment, no one spoke. She's a genius, Trump muttered, and no one's helping her. The translator nodded slowly. Her mother once tried to apply for educational assistance, but the bureaucracy is impossible, and because they're technically off-grid, the system doesn't even recognize her siblings exist. Sophia supports them all. She makes about $6 a week from selling crafts, sometimes more, but never enough. Trump's hand tightened slightly around the bracelet. $6 a week. He thought about the amount of money that got tossed around at dinners back home, thousands spent on wine, on consultants, on ads that barely moved a poll. Had made and lost fortunes over steak and golf. But here was a girl who could change her family's legacy with one shot at the right education, and no one had given it to her. Until now. I want everything documented, he said firmly, her full story. Medical records, family situation, get me a local attorney. I want to make sure there are no delays, no red tape. I don't care what strings we have to pull or how much it costs. That girl is going to school. The aide hesitated. Sir, the local system doesn't really have a process for... I didn't ask about their process, Trump interrupted. Well, build a process if we have to, over the next several hours. Trump's team worked through the night. Calls were made to his private foundation. His personal lawyer in New York was looped in. By sunrise, they had drafted the beginnings of what would become the Sophia Initiative, an entirely new pathway for providing direct, sustained education access to children identified as high potential but structurally abandoned by their governments. It was born from a scribbled name and a fraying bracelet empowered by an executive who, for all his bombast, knew when to double down on something real. Later that morning, Trump returned to the market not for show, not for cameras, but to speak again with Sophia's family. They met in a quiet alley behind a bakery, where Sophia's mother had been moved temporarily for care. Trump sat cross-legged on a mat across from them, the translator by his side, the sun rising hot above them. You don't know me, he said, and I don't know everything you've been through. But I know one thing, your daughter is a force, and if you'll let me, I want to help her become everything she's meant to be. Sophia didn't speak at first. She just looked at him, searching his face for the performance she was used to from adults. But it wasn't there, just resolve. And finally she nodded. That night, back in his suite, Trump found himself smiling, not the media smile, not the campaign grin, but something quieter, sincere. He had come for a trade deal. He'd leave having changed a life. And in time, the world would come to understand he'd changed far more than that. In the days that followed, the tone of Trump's entire diplomatic visit began to shift, but not because of any trade negotiation breakthrough or new political alliance. It shifted because behind the scenes, he was orchestrating something far more personal, something unplanned, and yet, to him, more important than any bullet point on a foreign policy agenda. While his aides continued coordinating the logistics of the economic summit, Trump's focus remained fixed on Sophia. Every spare moment between meetings, he asked for updates. Has her school enrollment been confirmed? Did we secure temporary housing for her family? What's the status of the medical care for her mother? His staff had never seen him so hands-on about something. That didn't involve press, polling, or strategy, but this wasn't politics, it was purpose. The world outside still had no idea what he was doing. He had given strict orders, no media leaks, no camera crews, no social posts. This isn't for headlines, he told his team. This is for her. And deep down, he knew that this decision wasn't just about Sophia anymore. It was about correcting something that had gnawed at him for years, that sense that global systems, for all their formality and fanfare, were too slow, too bureaucratic, too heartless to respond to the simple cry of a child with potential. He met again with Sophia and her mother in a secured wing of a private clinic, where doctors flown in on his dime were stabilizing her mother's condition with proper oxygen, antibiotics, and food. The moment Sophia saw him walk through the door, she jumped up, still clutching the same notebook he'd gifted her 2 days earlier. It was now filled cover to cover with sketches of mechanical lungs, fans, and purification systems, childlike, yes, but rooted in a real understanding of airflow and function. "She's teaching herself biomedical design," one of the doctors said, stunned. At 12, Trump sat beside her on the bed and flipped through the pages. "You don't need to sell bracelets anymore," he said. "From here on out, you're building your future, and I'm backing it." He didn't just stop at paying for school. That would have been too easy. Trump instructed his legal team to establish a private trust in Sophia's name, ensuring her education through graduate school if she desired. He also arranged for her siblings to be documented as legal citizens through quiet coordination with embassy officials, clearing the way for their future schooling. He even ordered his staff to partner with a global nonprofit focused on girls in STEM to ensure Sophia had mentors, resources, and opportunities that extended beyond this one moment. His advisors were stunned. "Sir, this is extraordinary, but it's not scalable," one remarked. "You can't personally intervene in every story like this." Trump didn't flinch. "No," he replied, "but you can make an example. You can remind people what's possible. When we stop treating these kids like statistics and start treating them like futures." One evening, as the summit neared its conclusion, Trump called a private dinner not with world leaders but with Sophia's family. In a garden terrace lit by hanging lanterns, with a soft breeze brushing across the table, they shared a meal not of extravagance but of gratitude. Sophia's mother, now breathing easier, thanked him quietly. "Not just for the help," she said through the translator, "but for seeing her." Trump nodded slowly, eyes on Sophia. "You don't ignore someone like her," he said. "You fuel her." That night, Trump returned to his suite and stood by the balcony overlooking the city. Somewhere in the labyrinth of lights below, a 12-year-old girl was no longer selling bracelets to survive but dreaming of labs, of machines of impact. And all it had taken was one person deciding not to look away. In that moment, he realized something that he would carry with him long. After the summit ended, not every legacy is built through policy. Some are built through people, and sometimes the most powerful statement a leader can make isn't in a treaty or a press conference, but in a single, quiet choice to act. The effects of Donald Trump's decision to intervene in Sophia's life began to ripple outward faster than anyone could have anticipated. Within just 2 weeks of his return to the United States, Sophia and her 2 siblings were safely relocated to a secure residence near an international preparatory academy known for supporting gifted children from crisis zones. The school, after reviewing Sophia's test results and application portfolio, which included detailed schematics of handmade air purifiers and a DIY solar fan, granted her a full academic scholarship through graduation. But it wasn't just the school that took notice. The trust fund Trump had set up, along with his quiet donation to a girls in STEM education program, triggered a chain reaction. Other philanthropists and business leaders began inquiring about similar cases. "If she exists, there must be hundreds like her," one CEO remarked in a closed boardroom discussion. Without announcing it publicly, Trump funneled more personal funds into the formation of what would later be called the Opportunity Futures Initiative, a private foundation committed to identifying, sponsoring, and mentoring underprivileged youth with exceptional potential around the globe. He didn't want his name plastered across it. "Keep it low-key," he told his legal team. "This isn't about brand, it's about results." Meanwhile, in the foreign country where Sophia had once lived, local newspapers began reporting on her story, even without knowing the full details. Photos of Trump stepping out of his motorcade, and talking with street children circulated online, prompting speculation and admiration. The local mayor, pressured by community leaders and inspired by the viral attention, launched a new municipal scholarship program focused on slum-dwelling youth. Ironically, what Trump had tried to keep quiet began building a reputation of its own. Back home in the U.S., rumors spread that he'd funded the relocation and education of a child from a slum halfway across the world. But his team remained tight-lipped. No press conference, no photo op. When asked by a reporter at a separate unrelated event about the rumors, he responded only with, "Sometimes, doing the right thing means not talking about it." Still, the message had already been sent. Political pundits were surprised, unsure how to frame the move. This wasn't policy. This wasn't strategy, one commentator said. This was personal. And oddly enough, that's what made it powerful. For Sophia, the transformation was immediate. She went from crafting bracelets to assembling robotic arms in a campus lab within months. She thrived in her new environment, not because she had been given charity, but because she had been given a chance. Her teachers often remarked that she worked as if she were trying to outrun time. "It's like she's making up for every second she lost," one instructor said. She took advanced mathematics by age 13, was building basic AI simulations by 14, and by 15, had already filed her first patent for a low-cost, solar-powered medical ventilation system for rural hospitals. Trump followed her progress silently. Her quarterly reports, artwork, letters, and test scores were sent to him personally, always handwritten, never printed. And each time, he would smile at the latest picture of Sophia standing in a lab coat, surrounded by tools, her sleeves rolled up and her eyes lit with focus. He never replied directly, but he kept every letter in a locked drawer in his office. As Sophia's story began to circulate, more widely through whispers in the education sector, private forums and human interest blogs, other world leaders took notice. The foreign government where she was born discreetly reached out to the U.S. Embassy to express gratitude, eventually sending a formal letter to Trump's team. The letter praised an act of humanity beyond politics and invited further collaboration on educational outreach initiatives. Quietly, Trump's philanthropic division began coordinating with local NGOs to build the first all-girls STEM center in the capital city where Sophia once sold bracelets. It would be named the Sophia Center for Innovation and Engineering. She had no idea. Even those close to Trump admitted they had never seen him this invested in something off the grid. "Hes different when he talks about her," one aide said privately. "It's not a pitch. It's not performance. It's personal." Trump began including education reform abroad as a sidebar topic in unrelated meetings. Not as leverage, but as legacy. "These kids, they're untapped gold," he once told a trade advisor, "and no one's mining the right way." His team began identifying additional children in war-torn, impoverished regions who had shown similar sparks raw intelligence buried beneath survival. Sophia had become the catalyst. She may not have known it then, but she had unintentionally changed the trajectory of not only her own family, but a growing global movement. A single act of kindness, rooted in instinct and followed through with relentless focus, had become a blueprint for micro-impact leadership. Sophia had gone from forgotten to found, from overlooked to overachieving, and while the world debated trade and treaties, the child who once sold woven bracelets was quietly building machines that could one day save lives. And still the most remarkable part of the story was that it had all begun not with strategy or optics, but with a glance out of a motorcade window and a decision to stop. 10 years passed like pages in a well-thumbed book, and in that time, the world turned many times over. Elections came and went. Global headlines shifted focus from one crisis to the next, and the name Donald Trump returned and receded from the public stage depending on the news cycle. But for one woman no longer a child, that name remained steady in her mind. Like the first stone in a bridge she had spent her life walking across. Sophia Khalid was no longer the barefoot girl selling hand-woven bracelets in the dirt alleys of a forgotten neighborhood. She was now Dr. Sophia Khalid, a biomedical engineer and inventor, recently named one of Forbes 30 Under 30 global innovators for her work in building affordable, AI-assisted medical devices for rural hospitals. Her most lauded invention, the Skylung, was a lightweight, solar-powered breathing unit now in clinical use in 7 countries. She had just returned from a summit in Nairobi, where she had been invited to speak on a panel of global scientists. She wore a sleek white blazer and black heels that clicked confidently against the marble floors as she stepped into the elevator of her university's research building. Her photo was on posters in the lobby, now student turned faculty, alumni turned icon, but she never let it change her. Her office remained simple: 1 desk, 2 chairs, a chalkboard with half-scribbled designs, and in the top drawer, among her tools and technical manuals, sat a small bracelet, faded, frayed, woven from reeds, a reminder of where it all began. Sophia rarely spoke about the man who had changed her life, partly because the world had politicized his name so heavily, but mostly because the encounter wasn't about fame or controversy to her. It was about kindness. Pure, inconvenient, unfiltered kindness. She hadn't seen him since the day he visited the clinic. They had exchanged letters over the years, never public, always personal. Handwritten notes from him, short and direct: proud of you, keep building, keep leading, keep going. She always wrote back, updating him on her progress, her siblings, her mother's health, her plans. She never asked for more. He never offered fanfare. They understood each other without needing much said. One day in the spring of her 22nd year, Sophia received a call she hadn't expected. A representative from a private estate invited her to speak at a closed-door event at an international leadership forum being hosted in Switzerland. The invitation came with no press, no agenda, just her name, a flight, and a date. She debated going. Her schedule was packed, and she rarely flew for non-research reasons. But something told her to accept. When she arrived at the modest but elegant venue in Geneva, she realized it wasn't a forum in the traditional sense. It was a gathering of fewer than 30 people, all leaders of impact-driven programs across the world. And there, near the back of the room, seated quietly in a tailored navy suit, was the man himself, Donald J. Trump. He looked older, of course. His hair more silver than gold now, but his presence remained unshakable. As she approached, he stood not for show, not for applause, just as a mark of respect. "Dr. Khalid," he said, extending his hand. "I've been waiting to shake this version of your hand for a long time." Sophia smiled. "And I've been waiting to say thank you as a woman, not just the girl you met." They spoke privately that evening, away from cameras, away from press. He listened as she told him about the girls she now mentored, the hospitals she helped equip, the countries adopting her designs. She spoke with conviction, with clarity, with the kind of fire that had once caught his attention in the middle of a dusty market. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day?" she asked. He nodded slowly, all the time. Then after a pause he added, "But I didn't save you. You were already built for greatness. I just gave you a runway." Before they parted, he handed her a slim folder. Inside was a proposal, the formation of a joint global initiative, one that would combine his foundation's capital with her research model. The aim? To fund and launch innovation labs across Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America for gifted, under-resourced youth. It would be called Project Untapped. Sophia blinked. "You still investing in bracelets?" she asked with a smirk. Trump chuckled. "Only the ones that make empires." The following year, Project Untapped launched in 5 countries. Within 2 years, it had helped over 500 students enter elite science academies, many of whom came from backgrounds just like hers. Sophia's story spread not through headlines or speeches, but through results. She had become more than a success story. She had become a system. And behind her stood a man whose brief moment of attention had created a legacy no camera had captured in real time. And so, as the world spun forward, debates raged, elections flared, and media narratives shifted. One truth remained quietly untouched, that somewhere in the noise of it all, a man in a motorcade looked out his window, saw a little girl with fire in her eyes, and chose to stop. And because he did, the world got to meet Dr. Sophia Khalid,